When your house is broken into by criminals, society doesn't blame you, the homeowner, for the attack of a thief. So why does it differ for victims of fraud or cybersecurity attacks? Why is there an expected and to some extent promoted sense of self-shame if you are the victim of a crime of this nature? I'm Stephen, I'm the Head of Strategic Solutions at Parker Neal, and today I'm joined by Cecilie Fjellhoy. We're sharing a mission to reframe our language and our perspective to try and empower victims to speak up more quickly and with greater confidence to challenge these issues that they're facing. So enough about me and our conversation today. I'm going to pass you over to the wonderful Cecilia. Cecilia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stephen, for having me.
You're
I've
very
been
welcome.
this conversation. No, I have many hats on these days, but I think I'm known for being a victim of romance fraud that was depicted in the Netflix documentary, The Tinder Swindler.
Yeah.
So my entire kind of, work in the fraud industry started from that, but then it kind of grew. I started and co-founded LoveSaid, which is a nonprofit which is a support center for romance fraud victims, because it didn't exist in the UK, like a specific one. And we really want that to be a think tank as well, like to create, as you said, that those conversations and that change that we need to see in society and in law enforcement and everywhere, how we are treating victims. And my background is in tech, so I'm like a techie at heart, and I worked as a UX designer for almost a decade before this happened to me. And now I travel around the world, being keynote speaker to speak on fraud awareness and how to center humans again. I think, like, after being in this industry for a while now, I've seen so much of my old work creeping in, where I'm like, oh, but why are we creating these solutions? Why are we putting tech at the top instead of the humans? So that's what I've come back to. So I started as a scam advisor for Charm Security. So I'm going a bit back into, and then of course, yes, I have a new Netflix show coming out on revenge, where I'm helping other fraud victims telling their stories and getting justice, and not revenge, I would say, but justice. And yeah, like, I'm an author as well. Like, Swindler Never After came out too. So with Pernilla from the Tinder Swindler, where it's kind of both in depth behind the scenes about what the Tinder Swindler case was really about and what happened with us afterwards, and kind of having those expert opinions about the tactics that he was using. And that a lot of the time the fight for fraud victims starts after you realize you've been defrauded. That's when the heavy lifting starts, and that is kind of part of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's me. I know that was very long, but I don't know how to.
No, I appreciate it. And like you said, for someone who doesn't know you or hasn't crossed paths with you so far, you certainly give them a lot of things to go and look at and learn a little bit more about you. Yeah, Google you. Yeah, you're out there. You're a relatively popular person. So Cecilia, I guess one question people might have straight away for you and I is, why are we having a conversation and sharing that with the public today? Why is that something that we're putting together? So I suppose we'll give a little bit more context as to what brought you and I together to speak. So we met, what was it, June? May time? Was it May? Down in London at an event that I won't say, just in case anything that I do say is too clear, so it makes it clear who we're talking about at any point. We met down in London at an event, and you were part of a panel that was talking about the, I think, more around deep fake side of scam and cybersecurity attack, and obviously lending your experience and expertise to that. And there was a member of that panel who was using some language that was a little bit shaming of people's experience who've gone through fraudulent attacks. And I could see that you were getting quite wound up by the language that was being used, and I couldn't help myself, and I had to open my mouth and just speak up, because it rattled me a little bit to see how kind of tone deaf this individual was to using this language of shame and referring to people who fall for these scams as stupid or naive. It was just really troubling. So that was where you and I connected.
Oh.
And
Yeah, because it was just like, kind of, I hear that sometimes, like, oh, I bet you learned your lesson now. And that is such a weird thing to say to someone who's experienced a crime. If you
yeah,
know, you would never say that to anyone else. And I think that is why we're coming together, because I've been now since 2019. I've been in the public eye, and every time I'm in the media, there's a comment section, and nothing's changed. Now
yeah.
in 2025, when the book was coming out, we were in the Times again, and all the comments was on This Morning as well in the UK. The entire comment section, it's been viewed over 1 million times on Instagram. That little clip from This Morning, and it's
Yeah.
with people saying that this could never happen to them. So where it just, yeah, that
And,
is. Yeah.
and I think that reverts back to the analogy that I used in our introduction today, and it's one that I use in a lot of my speaking engagements. Is that analogy of the robbery committed on a personal abode in your house? If we liken it from your experience of romance fraud, and from my world of cybersecurity attacks, which is 93% of the time is also social engineering, as opposed to those technical attacks. Nobody puts the blame on a homeowner if somebody smashes a window and breaks into the house. It is an attack. It is a crime that is perpetrated, but nobody blames the homeowner. So if you are the victim of a cybersecurity attack, you are the victim of a fraud attack, why then is the blame and the perception so much different from other very similar, although differently contexted, crimes? It's just a really bizarre thing that I can't wrap my head around from a societal norm.
I did I did it. I did a TEDx talk back in the day, and
Yeah.
that was about this, because I felt right after the Tinder swindle, that was I was most fascinated by kind of the public's perception and kind of how they're looking at these type of criminals compared to other type of criminals. And
Yeah.
with fraud, we put them on stages. I want to learn from them. You would never put that kind of, so just that I think is a big difference. You would never want to learn something from a murderer or a domestic abuser or a rapist. And you don't give them money for being criminals. So I think that is another thing. And I try to do some research because I love academic research. And part of it is like it's just a protect mechanism. We're doing it to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Just to feel like, okay, at least I know about this. I would have known. And that is like, so it's just a human trait again, just like becoming victims of this and being target, that is human too. But that is just, I don't think a lot of them mean any maliciously about it, but it does something when that language is always out there. But it's the same with the victim blaming headlines. So this is like a bigger thing than just individuals. But for example, journalists who are saying like, I must have sucker written on my forehead. I was stupid to have done this. I fall for this scam. And when you see this, when society see these headlines and are seeing that, or gave away money, old woman gave away her inheritance, like gave away, then it's like, well, you gave it.
Yeah.
No, they were stolen, they were
Yeah.
manipulated, they were abused, they were targeted by professional criminals. This language, I don't think we understand how integrated it is, and how we are like, we don't even think about it. But for the ones who are working in the field, it's just glaringly obvious what the fear is.
It blatantly is. And from your perspective, obviously, I have my own view on this, but I'd love to hear what your side is. In having this conversation today and trying to shine that light on what we see as the glaring issues of blame and shame and that negative language, where do you think the societal benefits are? Where do you think the people who do suffer from these attacks, be it fraud, be it cybersecurity, where do you think those benefits lie in us shining a light on this use of language and this kind of mindset in society?
Oh, both the benefits that more people will come forward and we will actually get proper reporting on these cases and what is going on. I think we'll be able to stop them a lot easier. I think if we as a society look at it as industrialized crime and high crime that it is, going international, cross borders, scam factories. If people would really understand what this is really about, we would be prioritizing it much higher. Because I think the notion now is that, oh, you just lost some money, But if we try to put it in more of the aspect, but these are criminals getting a hold of this money that are funding terrorism, who are, holding people captive to scam other people, human trafficked. If you know what I mean, I hate that we maybe have to put it in these larger, more societal world, language instead of saying,
Yeah.
oh, feel bad for Cecilia who lost money to the
Yeah.
Tinder swindler. I am more like, well, he's still out there and he's defrauding everyone. So kind of, even if you don't feel bad for me, think about all the others who are being
Yeah.
victims of him. Like, this is so much more than just these individual stories. It is a huge industry. So yeah, the benefit will be that we will have less crime overall. Like, all other crimes will get less if we can stop the funding of it.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a kinder society too. I think it's so
Yeah,
much
absolutely.
negativity. The comment sections on this are vitriol. It's laughing. People are laughing. It's not that only that you feel a bit. I think with burglary, for example, if you didn't lock your door, it's still a break-in, But of course, people can say, "Oh, you should have done that," but they still feel bad for you for losing everything. While here, it's like they're taking it as far as, it's not like, oh, a bit like, yeah, maybe you should have thought, but it's like, ha ha ha. They're laughing at you and then are enjoying you. I had one comment. I loved seeing you cry on national television for being the gold digger you are. You are why dating is the way it is today. Kind of so angry. And that's another thing. Societal incels love this kind of, this
Yeah.
hope that now finally women are getting what men have been subjected to. I was like, this is just not this is not even a gendered crime, So this entire, what we're talking about, society as fraud, we're just on false grounds as well, because we
Yeah.
don't have male voices.
No.
Because yeah,
And
so
I think that was one of the things that I really saw in terms of parallels of your world and the space where you work, and obviously in the cybersecurity space where I am, is there isn't that necessary gender bias on my side of things. So
mm,
I thought, actually, well, we draw the parallels and hopefully we can lend a genderless voice to
mm,
the conversation, as opposed to it being one where there may be a gender driven agenda by some people to maintain this language that they're using.
mm,
I think certainly from my side, obviously, increased reporting is massively important. But I think to add to that, speed of reporting when you see these sorts of exercises that criminals undertake against
mm,
individuals and or organizations, companies, the speed of which people come and ask for help and
mm,
admit the their experience as part of
mm,
this, and that they have, from a phishing exercise, they might have clicked on the link because they weren't really thinking, or they were occupied with something else and they just opened that email, which we all do on a daily basis. If you can tell me you give 100% of thought to 100% of the things you do every day, I will call you a liar happily. But yeah, the speed of which somebody reports that, and equally from your side, if you had at that first doubt of things not being right, if you'd have felt the level of empowerment to go, this isn't right, and I know how to go about asking for help, I'm sure you
and
would feel that would have improved your situation somewhat.
yeah, because in my case, like, if people haven't watched the Tinder Swindler, like,
Mm,
how I was defrauded was through manipulation and coercion. So I was the one kind of handing, like, talk to the bank,
yeah.
made the transactions. Though sometimes I had my bank ID, my digital identity, so I was kind of confirming everything. Kind of like,
Yeah.
I knew that he was doing transactions. It was an
Mhm.
identity theft. But I think that's the issue with a lot of times reporting with these type of cases, because we are incriminating ourselves, or we feel that we've done something wrong. Like, for example, I gave him my credit card, so he
Yeah.
had my credit card in hand. That is not allowed. And I think by that is hindering reporting too, because then you're like, oh, you're scared of police, or they made you scared, or I remember that was one of my first questions, that I was so scared that the banks were going to go after me. I was crying, you know, it's like, that was my biggest fear. So you didn't even think
Right.
about the police, but you're scared what's going to happen to me, because I know that I've done some really bad stuff here in a point of crisis that you thought. And
Yeah.
looking back, and that is what I think is another thing about this compared to other types of crimes, where, yeah, where kind of the lines gets blurred, seeing it from the
Mm.
outside. So even
Oh,
when,
100%.
yeah, that is what I hate about this, because you're so traumatized and so scared, and then you meet people who needs to be kind of a bit more neutral. You know, they come in, for
Mm.
example, the bank or financial institutions needs to look, okay, were they part of the scam?
Yeah.
Because they have to, that's part of their job, because sometimes they are. So you can't just like,
Yeah.
oh, poor you, we will refund you the money. And
Yeah.
that is like, but that is kind of where I'm looking at it from a victim's perspective. Oh, that's like, that should be least of their worries
Mm.
after being victim of a crime. And I think that is kind of the road where you're off, that you don't really know. And yeah, that's another part of why language and the victim blaming narrative is that you don't really understand what's happened to you when you go out of it. So
No.
kind of when you tell people, oh, I had my boyfriend, like, you know, and he defrauded me, or my girlfriend or whoever, and then people are like, but why did you do that? You know, that's their first reaction. Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Why did you do that? Ah,
Yeah.
you know, oh, you should have. And you don't know about the tactics. You haven't read
No.
yourself. No one knows. So you were just like, I don't really know. So you feel even worse, because it's just, but that's just a natural reaction for someone who loves you. Why did you do that? You know, like, oh,
Mm.
that is just the wrong language again, because that is not the question you should be asking. It's like, how could
No.
he, well, how could they do that? How could they continue to do it? So I think that is another thing, is that trying to explain this to people when you just come out of it as a
Yeah.
victim is difficult. And that's where the blame continues. Well, you gave him, you know, because you would say, well, I gave him, you know, I gave him
Yeah.
money. I took up money, gave him my credit card, you know.
Mm.
Still to this day, I say sometimes or sometimes I say I took up, or I used. Sometimes I still use that language. I
Yeah.
didn't, you know,
Yeah.
because you're so
Yeah. You
intertwined when it happens. It's
exactly. And
yeah,
I think as well from an outside perspective, and certainly until you get a little bit of space from it and
yeah,
you can self-analyze, you can't really explain what's happened, because you realize that you've been manipulated, but until you look at it from with that level of perspective, you can't see that each of these steps was a way that you were engineered and you were manipulated to go along on his journey that he laid out for you to get
yeah.
access to your money and your resource. And I think that's a difficulty that we have in my world,
Mm,
is if somebody clicks on that link, or somebody does something that they maybe shouldn't do, or
yeah,
we'd love them not to do, but ultimately everybody is a human and we all make
yeah.
mistakes. Um, they don't know what happens next, and I think maybe that level of not really knowing about it, that can cause that sort of blind spot where you can't explain what you've done, and therefore people have to attribute the blame somewhere, and maybe that lands with you, possibly. I don't know. It's a tough one.
No, no, like I've hold several talks for more of, you know, the business world, where it is
Yeah,
phishing,
yeah,
these messages, it's
yeah. Mm.
emails. And sometimes when I go in and do a talk, I'm like, what does this have to do with romance? Like at the start, I was a bit like,
Yeah,
oh, but I think that human element is always present. And if you
it
then,
is.
or if you're not being on enough, as you say, sometimes we are a bit loofy. Or if they gain the trust, maybe they just think it's real. That's why you click it. You don't click it thinking it's a scam. It's exactly the same thing. You don't click a link or fill in something thinking, oh, this is a scam. I'm just going to do this for
Yeah,
fun. The same as romance fraud. I said, well, I didn't do this knowing I was being defrauded, and having to explain that to people, where hindsight is a gift. Yes, if I would look an extra time over, because I sent in fake documents that I didn't know was fake, but kind of when I look back at them now more in detail,
yeah,
really it was very bad. But kind of when you have that trust element, that a lot of, you know, the phishing attempts are getting better and better. You know, they can call from a genuine phone number now, for
yeah.
example. What are we going to say then? The victim still gets to blame in these cases.
Mm.
We've had that in Norway,
Yeah,
where the courts are saying, even though they called from a phone number from the bank, no, no, you shouldn't have given that information out. And that is what I mean. I just feel like that is just my opinion. No matter what, the victim gets the blame, even with deepfakes now, where they're saying, oh, what are we going to do when we no longer know it's a scam? You will always find a way to blame the victim. Even in my case, when you met them in person,
Yeah.
even when you don't meet them, no matter what. Like, I just feel like, I think it's just human nature for us to just like blame the victims no matter what. I just love those
Yeah.
we have now around deepfakes. What are we going to do now? And I was like, I know what you're going to do. Blame the victim. Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, well, so now finally you will realize that manipulation can work, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, it's
I'm
interesting.
sorry, I just
So if you,
love, yeah.
no, don't worry about it. It's absolutely fine. So if you think about that blame
Mm-hmm.
culture, and you experienced it, that level of self fear and self shame that you might have been brought in
Mm-hmm.
as another perpetrator of fraud within the experience you had. If that culture wasn't there and you were more empowered and you felt like, okay, I can report this and this will be dealt with, and I feel confident that I am reporting this as a victim of crime, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the experience you had, if that was a societal norm, what do you think your experience would have been like? What do you think the experience of, let's say, the other individuals who who you have spoken with for your upcoming show on Netflix, and other people that you speak with on a day-to-day, what do you think their experiences would have been like if that was a societal norm, where there was no fear, there was no blame, there was no shame, it was report and it was dealt with?
I can't even imagine how different my post trauma would have been
Yeah.
like. Because I was really pressured because I had 9 creditors. So the entire thing was just, well, we don't care. You signed the loan agreements, from that perspective. I
Yeah.
was seen, I was, fully in control, and they didn't care. So when I look back, the decisions I made those few weeks in 2018 had a lot of, ripple effects that, for example, made me have to file for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
If they would have given me a bit more breathing time with empathy and said, all we want is to figure this out the best way, instead of having to push me to kind of make some decisions that I was like, at the time, yes, I did, because I sold my flat. That's what I did to get a
Yeah.
hold of my own money. But then I was sued, so I used them on lawyers instead. If you know what I mean. But what if, if you think about it, if you re-engineer how you, as a creditor, treats victims, of this traumatizing crime, because they don't understand what this crime is.
No.
So they're just seeing a loan agreement. Well, she signed this. And I was like, well, I thought it was my boyfriend, he manipulated me. But like, oof, tough luck for you. We don't have liability. Like, we don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you need to pay. If they would have seen it as the abusive element that it actually is, then they would have had to go through a lot more steps, like domestic abuse victims,
Yeah.
like a lot of, like, that is where they should look at it, that's what you've been through. So of course, I talked to many other victims that is the worst part. It is when they're in the ditch here and they're trying to scream out to, these larger organizations, and no one is listening. They're going
Yeah.
bulldozing into just to get, their money. And I think for a victim who feels it so much more on their body, the emotional aspect, the trauma that they have, that is what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
But no one cares about that. Everyone talks about the money. I had that from several acquaintances. They're not friends anymore over in Norway. So when are you going to start paying down your loans? It's not the bank's fault that you were defrauded and you should just pay it. So everyone was concerned about my debt and that financial part of it,
Drama.
but not about me. And I think most fraud victims will tell you that is what most
Yeah.
people are concerned about. Like, yeah, you fucked up your life, fix it. And you're like, it's not fixable. There are some stuff that is like, that's why I had to file for bankruptcy, because it wasn't
Yeah.
fixed. Like, but yeah, so that is kind of, I can see it is my case, even though it was extraordinary how it was done, how I was treated afterwards wasn't. When I talk about what happened to me afterwards, everyone is going through that same motion. And still
Yeah.
to this day, they are. Like the victims I helped in this new show, I can't say where, but like the how they're being met by
Yeah.
law enforcement. It's, for me, I was shocked. And that is so many years after. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sad. Like that is why LoveSaid, why is my nonprofit exists, is it is to be able to hopefully create that change and do training.
Yeah,
And I mean training in a sense that they need to understand not only how to speak to victims, but what is this crime,
yeah,
and get that empathy in them. Because today, I can't fault them if no one has told them. This is just being put into financial crime bucket, which it always
yeah,
is,
yeah,
and they treat it as such. Fraud can be anything from, I tried to sell something on Facebook Marketplace and I sent it away and, I never got the money, to romance and investments frauds, where
yeah.
it's life-changing and
Mhm.
abusive. So I hate that. I hate when you go to police, I'm reporting fraud, and then police is like,
Yeah,
that that is like, okay. And
yeah,
yeah, so I think that is like, we need training, and I don't think it's
yeah.
priority.
No, and I don't think it's something that changes overnight either, is it? It's something that will be an ongoing thing. And I think, again, to draw the parallel to the cybersecurity world, it's
Mhm.
eh, if you feel empowered, and I think this is possibly more of an individual business that can foster a positive cybersecurity culture, as opposed to maybe in your experience, actually, that's a bit more of a societal thing. But ultimately, societal change will change everything for everyone.
That's what
So
I'm.
that's the big hairy goal that we're going after here. But yeah, I think if you foster a positive culture internally with no blame and no shame and open communications of, oh yeah, a mistake has been made and I have reported it directly. That's the difference between, big organizations, yes, losing millions of pounds. We see, or millions of dollars, or wherever you're based, losing huge amounts of money. We see that in the news all the time. But what we don't see in the news is well, certainly here in the UK, 52% of SMEs
Mm,
suffering cyber attacks last year, and that on average kind of costing them about £125,000 purely in downtime.
shit.
So,
Yeah.
like, massive amounts for small companies that could kill that company. And that company might be, you don't know what they're doing. They might be the next big thing in looking at research into cancers.
Yeah.
And do you know what I mean? And that's where I think trying to address that change of blame, that change of perception when it comes to blame, that
Yeah.
change of perception when it comes to shame, and foster those positive reporting cultures of, this is a crime. When a crime happens, you report it via whatever method it is that you report, and then that is it, and you are right in doing so. I think that's where we've got to get to.
Yeah.
um yeah,
Because I'm
it's
really like,
interesting.
because that reminds me a bit like about the Marks and Spencer,
Yeah,
how long that took. And they said it was a
yeah,
human error. And I'm always thinking about that person and kind of, did it go as bad as it went because it took time? That is what I'm
well,
really, I would
we'll
love to know this
well
change here.
we'll
'Cause that,
find out in about 18 months, won't we, when the reports come out.
yeah, because
But
that is
yeah,
like, I
yeah,
first was that, I'm like, but that lasted for months. Like now, recently, they've started doing returns in store again. Like for me,
yeah,
that was so. And but when I just think it's interesting when I look at when they were reporting on it, I was like, yes, a human, and I was like, yes, tons of money's been lost, but what about that human? They must feel.
yeah.
Oh, I can't even imagine
Mm.
what they must be feeling, and I'm
Uh,
so curious to how upper management and how they were treated in regards to that.
yeah,
You know?
exactly. It'll be really interesting to see
Yeah.
that, because what certainly what you and I would hope is that person was purely understood as a human who had a behavioral misjudgment, or had 15 things that they were currently doing and clicked that link, or whatever the specific social engineering weighing was. You would hope that it was a person that didn't immediately recognize a threat.
Mm,
And every single person within Marks and Spencer or within every corporation is fallible. We are all able to miss those red flags. So you would hope they were just treated as an individual, but I
yeah.
also hope that they were empowered enough in that organization to report that human error as soon as they recognized it to be one. You never
But
know.
especially, yeah, I mean, I'm super interested in that
Yeah,
case. Then I'm like, okay, if it went that bad, what kind of other mechanisms did they have in place? If I'm just very interested to see how many errors, if a chain of errors, it might have been as
yeah,
well. We don't know, because this was just the amount of money they lost, as you say, they have the means to be able to lose it, but a lot of companies wouldn't have. That's what I was thinking, especially when it happened to Mark. I was like, thank God it happened to them that have the
Yeah. And
capabilities of,
uh, you're absolutely spot on. And the thing that bothers me so much, and for anyone who is watching this who doesn't really know too much about what I do and what my organization does, we kind of work in that SME space because ultimately the headlines are always going to be caught by the big stories, the companies who've lost millions or billions to these cyber attacks, and the SME world stays a little bit unaware and to some extent uneducated, and that is by far a general statement, not to everybody, because there are some organizations who are absolutely fantastic when it comes to this sort of thing. But my organization focuses on working with that SME space to help them be better prepared, better educated, more aware, and more resilient to these things coming, because it is coming for that market as well. The problem is it doesn't get the headlines, so they
yeah,
don't think it's going to happen to them. So you're right. When you see those stories going, oh well, yeah, Marks and Spencer can take a multi-million-pound hit this year and it'll be fine. They can do it. But what about those organisations that are 30 people and their turnover is 2 million a year? If they suffer that attack, they're gone. That organisation's dead, and that's so many people's livelihoods gone. And whoever knows what their supply chain is and what their customer base looks like, how is that going to be affected?
this is what
That
I
doesn't hit the news a lot.
but that is what I mean. Like they're saying it's a victimless crime, but that is not a victimless crime. If
No,
people
not at
lose
all.
their jobs, that can have a detrimental impact of both people's mental health. They might lose their homes. I don't think we understand the implications of, this type of crime. And it's the same like across the world with, for example, romance fraud, where sometimes the numbers aren't as high, yeah, most likely as company fraud, for example, or the big,
Yeah,
billion.
yeah,
And then it doesn't get prioritized because the fraudsters get amount of time in jail based on how much they've taken. How much?
yeah,
And for me that is insanity. So a lot of victims, like, and I mean that, I bring it up because I was part of that, where my case was dropped because it was only £200,000, but the
mm,
company fraud Simon did 500,000 was much worse in that
yeah,
regard. You say that to an individual who lost everything,
mm,
from a normal personal perspective, £200,000 is an insane amount of money. That
yeah,
seems so out of touch. And
mm,
for example, I had a victim down in Argentina who wrote to me, who lost their life savings, $5,000. Yes,
yeah,
for us, maybe not that much. That was what she was dependent on. Like, and for me to talk about a monetary value here, to say, how serious of a crime it was in some of these fraud cases, I'm that's another thing where I feel so sad for the amount of victims that go to police,
mm,
and then because of the value of it, no, we're not
yeah.
going to price that, or yeah, you can just because that is what they go after.
It's
Yeah,
really tough, that, because that's such a systemic issue, isn't it? That's so tough to deal with, that you're not considered as important or as big a crime because your amount is not as much as
you
X
can
amounts.
lose that.
Yeah, it's horrible, that. And I think, do you know
Yeah.
what? There's a term that we use quite a lot. We talk about inequity and the inequitability of resource
Mm.
when you look at that lower value of cybersecurity.
Mm.
And that's something that we're really like charging headforth into challenging. And it's so similar to what you are doing in your world. I think that's why I just immediately connected with you when we met. You're just running such a parallel effort with a slightly different scope, given your own experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting, and definitely something that I think, from what I've seen of what you do and the way you speak and the passion with which you speak, but also the way you engage with other victims, and from the conversations that you and I have had, you're very proactive in linking up a lot of the big tech, a lot of the banks, a lot of governmental and police bodies. You're quite good at being in the room with a lot of these people and making sure this message is continually being heard, whether
Yeah,
they want to hear it from you or not.
that's what I feel like. as I said, I'm just happy being in the UK, where
Yeah.
at least we have it in law, the reimbursement scheme now
Yeah.
for victims. So the banks or financial institutions couldn't really ignore the human element to this, because they would
Yeah.
have to take the monetary hit. And again, that's when they start caring. I don't care why you care, I'm fine. Like, that is why you're caring, because you're losing money. But kind of for me, I'm quite lucky, because in other countries, as the US, they're so far behind, where kind of, if you talk about victim support, for example, for them, so I kind of, a lot of them are, or some of them, I'm saying some, would say, no, why, we don't have any liability, why would we care?
Yeah.
That's where the blame comes in, because I don't think that comes from them as that they've been told, to not care about other human beings, but that comes from the shame.
Yeah.
And the blame that they already are feeling, like, well, you did this to yourself.
Yeah.
You're not a victim, so why should we as a bank care for you?
Mm.
And then when I heard that, I was like, oh, because so few are doing victim support properly. Like, why should we care about them as humans? And that is like where I was like, oh,
Yeah.
God. So we have a long way to go, but I'm
Absolutely.
never giving up. But
No. And that's where you will continue to make change, though, when you are as passionate about it and you are as persistent and you. I mean,
yeah.
let's be honest. You're like a bulldog with this, and you're not letting go of it. And I've seen the way that you go at people sometimes when it's just
but,
not
sometimes
quite right.
it's so nice just to be like that you just represent yourself as well, because I
Yeah.
totally people who work for companies who kind of they need to have the proper partnership with people that I'm calling out, but I don't need that. In the end, they will come. I'm really sure that we will come to the point where, for example, Meta would have to start talking about this in a proper way, and they are kind of, but it's, well, and I've seen that change as well. Before 2018, 2019, Meta was not part of any conversation. At least now they are participating in conferences and our panels. They're not being called out as harsh as I would have liked them to, or not called out harsh, but like critical questions.
Yeah.
That would have been nice to ask, kind of, what are you actually doing? But I see, for example, on LinkedIn, someone was posting, oh, WhatsApp removed 6.3 million fake accounts or fraudulent accounts. But for me, 6.3 out of how many?
Yeah.
For me, that is 6.3. Woohoo! But I'm like, okay, but compared to what?
Yeah. Have you got 200 billion fraudulent accounts on your platform? Because 6.3 is not it's not even a percentage.
No,
Yeah.
that is where millions, great. But I'm just like, how many? Because know that that's where they're flourishing. I can see WhatsApp being out there as well, priding themselves of having, cryptic, messaging. No one knows what's saying. And I was like, oh, and every time I see that, I'm like, yeah, we're good people. We just want to have our data protected. But like for fraudsters, that is just like, oh, it breaks my heart that in this industry where I look at privacy as I would have loved for them to actually have that insight to see who is being defrauded on their platforms. And that is kind of my sorrow about it, because I fully understand people want privacy and don't want big tech looking into what we're writing to each other. But that's like such a sorrow where I'm like, well, they take them to Telegram, they take them to WhatsApp on the grounds that they can continue the conversations with anyone looking in. That is, So it's I love it. Like, I do a lot, but it's a lot of different pots as well. So that is I'm hoping when I do this, and like when I'm in I call it entertainment, because I feel a true crime series or a true crime documentary tends to lean, like people find it entertaining, what I really, really would like now, though, is to kind of elevate the conversation. That is kind of my dream. It's like to use, hopefully, some of the reception to maybe have a call out, because on social media, if people will then start commenting, how stupid of them to actually use that as a platform to say, well, let's have a bigger conversation about why is that your initial thought? Why is that what you want to comment on underneath this? Because that's how I feel we need to grab a hold of it. I want to be a lot more involved in the social media space, because that's where people are. That's what's about this. So
do you know what I will say, though, from a point of recognition of the efforts that you put in, is you're very similar to what I want to do. You want to have that elevated level of conversation. You want to enact real change. And my view is to take every SME organization in the UK and put that shield around them to at least get them better than where they are now. Just give them one step up. But that's a massive, audacious goal that I have. In our conversation today, and in the conversations that you are constantly having, you may never find out about it, but you are making a difference for one person who will see what you're doing, who will watch your series, who saw you on Tinder Swindler, who saw you on This Morning, who read a blog that you posted and felt empowered. So even though it takes time to make that change on a bigger scale, you should still be proud of the fact that you are 100% making a difference for at least a person every time you do something like this.
Yeah.
And that's the solace that we have to take it with these big goals, is we have to make those step changes for society, but we can make a massive change for an individual or one business or whatever it might be as we're doing this.
Yeah, how long have you been in the industry?
So I've been working in cybersecurity for a while now. I've been internal in cybersecurity. I'm about 5 months into my journey with Parker Neal now. So they're about 3.5 years into their journey as an organisation. So my two founders were Big Four consultancy, then went in-house, one as a chief data officer, one as a chief information security officer, and just kind of saw that the industry was really good at servicing companies with massive budgets, but not really good at servicing those organizations who maybe operate on a little bit more of a shoestring, maybe don't have that same sort of level of financials. So it's been a long journey for them, and I'm still relatively new to it, but I've known the guys since they set up, and it was something that I was really passionate about getting involved in, because there's a certain level of altruism when you're working with business at that level, because obviously you have to be scale appropriate in terms of what you do, but you have to be cost appropriate. When you're cost appropriate, there are not big margins. So there has to be a level of altruism in terms of what you do.
Especially in that, as you said, in that sector, and trying to get those businesses to understand the value of it as well, when it's kind of maybe, I don't know, from your, like, most like a box ticking exercise.
You do see that, and to some extent, I'm not going to lie, that is quite a large aspect of cybersecurity, is a box ticking exercise. It's, have you done this? Yeah, okay, you are 1% more secure than someone who hasn't done it. A lot of it is that, and I think that sometimes my industry hides behind the fact that it's a super high tech, it's people in hoodies in basements, and it's hackers, and it's all this. A lot of the time, people can get access to something because you didn't tick that box in a system setup. It is so simple sometimes, and that's what we try to do, is make it a little bit more simple and a little bit more accessible, and get away from jargon, just so people can understand what they're doing. I think on that, like, coming out of this conversation today, if I'm talking about advice that I would give to, from my perspective, I'm talking to organizations. For yours, you're talking to individuals who are primarily suffering the crime. You're talking to society and systems that are in place of how to go about fixing it. My advice within an organization would be foster a positive culture, have training as to what people should be looking out for and how to report it, not for the sake of doing it, but because you want to protect yourselves and you want to protect the people that work with you. I think it's also important for them to understand what happens next. I know, if I'm, certainly selfishly, I like to know everything that I'm doing all the time, and I like to know how things work. I was speaking to a supplier of ours yesterday, and we just explained to me how this works. I don't need to know how it works, but if I understand how it works, I can better feed information back to you so I can get a better service from it. And I think sometimes that's something that people in cyber and in IT forget, that people might just need that little bit of a show under the hood of how things work, to go, okay, so when I report it, you do that, and then I can just hands off. Right, okay, that's interesting. That's really simple for me to do. And I think that removes a lot of the fear. And if you've got that positive culture as a company, remove the blame, remove the shame, I think you can tackle a lot of cybersecurity issues way more quickly and therefore way more effectively.
Mm.
What would your advice be, Cecilia, for people who are going through or have gone through or may in the future go through similar scams, similar fraud, similar attacks that you went through?
Mm.
What would your advice be to them in the world that we live in right now?
I would ask people to trust themselves a lot more and listen to their gut a lot more. I see some of it is like you can't trust yourself. I think that's the issue when you go into these type of social manipulated and social engineered scams, is that you don't trust yourself enough, kind of deep inside, but you're not asking the questions. So if you ask all the questions that you said, that you're curious and you like to know what's going on and stuff, when I was at the end of my fraud, that's when I started asking the questions I should have asked at the start.
Yeah.
The fraudsters won't be able to give a good enough excuse. They might lie surfacely, but if you go digging, asking some more why questions, and I wish people would just be a lot more curious and treat it as, especially when it comes to romance fraud, treat it as a bad relationship. Would you want to be in this relationship where you're being treated like this? So it's not about the money.
Okay.
When I look back at that relationship with him, that was not a great relationship. You know, no one who loves you would put that kind of responsibility and pressure on you. If you know what I mean?
Okay.
The question wouldn't even. So for a lot of people that are in these situations, it's like, is that how someone who really cared about you would treat you, ask you for, or put you under? So that is what when I look in hindsight, that I wish I could have just listened a lot more to myself. And that it's better to retract from something than go way too deep into it. Kind of sunk cost fallacy, if you heard about it, the more you put into anything, the harder it is to leave.
Yeah.
That's when it comes to investment fraud, romance fraud, relationships. Well, I put so much heart and energy and passion and money, and like I can't, oh God, but that is this is what I mean. That is outside fraud.
Yeah.
Look at it as a relationship, and this relationship you can have with your business partner, it can be with your friends. It doesn't need to be a romantic relationship, but kind of, who is this individual to you, and do you really know them? And I think us as a society and as a tribe, we need to just be kinder to each other when we come out of it. That is what I wish for, that we can be. So
amazing.
That's
well, thank you, Cecilia. I mean, obviously something that we've been trying to get this in the diary for a while and get you and I back together and talking, but I really appreciate you in a very busy schedule that you have, taking the time out so we can have this conversation and put it out there publicly to try and tie our worlds together. For anybody who wants to know more about you or catch more of what you do, or maybe they're really just interested and want to see more of what you're doing, tell people where they can connect with you and where they can see you next.
Well, I don't know when you will put this out, but
I would my plan is for this to be out within about a week.
Okay, yeah. So So, but would love some support for Love, Con, Revenge on Netflix if you want to go and watch that. You can read Swindle Never After. I think it's a great book when it comes to actually going into the tactics of relationship fraud. And we have an interview, for example, Erin West, who heads up Operation Shamrock, that talks about, the scam compounds and what is actually going on. I'm on LinkedIn. Find me there if you want to add me. Sometimes post something useful there. And like I have my website, CecilieFjellhoy.com, and LoveSaid.org as well for the nonprofit. So yeah, you can find me in all channels. And my Insta is Cecilia _ if you want to follow me there as well. So there's so many. Stephen, you can't ask me like
listen, I'm giving people the opportunity that I had with you, Cecilia, of I got to bump into you in person, and I managed to grab you, and you and I sat there for about 45 minutes just shooting the shit. And I think for someone who is as open as you are and as communicative as you are, I think, just being able to reach you via LinkedIn or on your Instagram or something like that, someone might go, oh my God, I'm going through what she went through. I'm going to ask for some advice. So that's why I say, where can people catch you? Because you're really giving with your time. So I just want to thank you for that. And again, thank you for joining us on this today. I look forward to putting this out there, and hopefully we can influence even just one person or one company to make a little bit of change, this has been positive.
Thank you for having me, Stephen. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.